Well, hello there. Old Dad Guy here. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. We're going to stick with a Bigfoot theme since we're headed to the Pennsylvania Bigfoot camping experience this weekend. It's also the reason this is going to be a little bit shorter of an episode as we prepare and get ready for that. I've been thinking about going live out there, actually, if I can, if there's a good enough signal out there in the Laurel Highlands. My daughter may actually help me out there too, as well, so you may see her, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, here you go. A campfire account from the Allegheny National Forest. I didn't pick that spot for any particular reason beyond the way the map turned to green and stayed green for miles. The Allegheny National Forest does that to you, puts a thumb over the rest of the world. The road numbers grow small and odd. The towns drift apart like islands, and the hills knit together until you feel the seams of everything else loosen. That's what we were after. A weekend where we could hear ourselves think and maybe for a change, not hear anything at all. We were four. Me, Sarah, who never goes anywhere without a camera and a thermos that could insulate the small moon. George, an old friend whose knees swear they're 80 until there's firewood to split. And Helen, who teaches history and treats county lines like chapters. We're older than we admit to one another and younger than the jokes we tell. Once a year, we try to find a patch of forest to pitch a couple of tents and see if we still know how to sleep with the ground under our backs. We came in from the north, crossed the river near Warren, and dropped south into the long, dark swells of the forest. Leaves were mostly down, late autumn, and the air had that thin, metallic bite you get when everything damp is thinking about turning hard. The sky was clear enough to carry voices a long way, if there'd been any to carry. Forest County, Helen said, tapping the map on her lap. You know, there was a report not far from here last winter. Campers heard, well, you don't want me to say it. Say it, George said, already smiling. Vocalizations, she said, like she was reading it straight off a clipboard. About 22 miles south of Warren. Big word for yelling, George said. It's a specific word, Helen said. Different kind of yelling. Like my neighbor when I snowblow at 7 in the morning, I said. Worse, she said. Lower. Stranger. Sarah glanced at me and shrugged. If something wants its privacy, she said, it picked the right zip code. We turned off the main road onto gravel and, after a while, onto something that would struggle to qualify as that. The tree trunks closed in and the sun stepped back a few paces. Our phones lost their bars like a shedding animal. It marked a clearing on the topo where an old CCC spur used to run. Maybe it would be flat enough for us. Maybe not. Out there, you accept a certain amount of improvising. Before I climbed in, I walked to the end of the pull-off and looked back down the trail. The trees were only trees. The run was only water. The morning had that uncomplicated brightness of a day that had decided to be just fine. But as my eyes adjusted to the lay of it, the slope and the repetition of trunks, and the way the light fell in bars, I saw a shape step from the one vertical to another, and be gone. Not a dash, not a panic, a decision. Then the forest closed the door behind it. I could be wrong. We can all be wrong. I've gotten a lot of things wrong over the years. Names, directions, exit numbers, the number of scoops a coffee maker can forgive. But what I heard that night was not an error. It had shape and it had reply. call and answer like braided wire. And the way the ground held weight in the morning, the way the air held a voice, did not feel like the kind of mistake you want it to be. On the drive out, no one turned on the radio. We didn't need noise to stitch up the quiet. We needed the quiet so we could fold it and put it away somewhere it would stay. At the county line, Helen closed her notebook with a little breath. Well, she said, whatever it wasn't coyotes. Coyotes are going to be offended, George said, and the laugh landed more like relief than anything else. Sarah scrolled through the long exposures on her camera and turned it so we could see. The stream was a ribbon, pale and soft. The trees were taller than they had any right to be. In one frame, the one where the firelight was low and the run looked like a path laid out by a cautious hand, the far edge of the clearing was a little darker than it should have been. You could tell yourself it was a trick, and we did, because that's also something you do. We turned onto a bigger road and then a bigger one, and the forest admitted we were leaving by degrees. Cell service came back one bobble at a time. The world presented us with billboards and a diner and a hardware store, and a man in a yellow hat washing a truck that didn't need to be washed yet. We were home before we decided we were ready. That night, in my own bed, listening to my own furnace say its small domesticated piece, I thought about the way the call had lifted and the answering call had found it. I thought about the weight of a body in leaf litter, measured in steps and not in pounds. I thought about a stubborn animal, or a cautious mind, or something I am not required to name to be certain of. And I thought about how the forest will let you go if you let it keep what it keeps. I'll go back to the Allegheny, not to that clearing. We shook hands, so to speak. And I'm good for my end of the bargain. But to the hills with their long, old patience and the water that doesn't raise its voice anymore, I'll go back because whatever I heard reminded me that the world is larger than my vocabulary for it. I'll go back because I want the quiet that isn't empty. I'll go back because once in a while, it's good to be a guest. But when the light drops out of the trees and the air gets that taste of iron and old leaves, and we're sitting shoulder to shoulder close to the heat, I'll be listening. Not for an answer, not even for a question, just for the shape of a voice moving where we can't see and the way the land around it makes room. If you were wondering whether we reported anything, we didn't. Helen kept her notes and George kept his doubt, and Sarah kept the picture. That was surely nothing, and I kept the sound like a truck going under a bridge, only not a truck and not a bridge. Some experiences don't want to be written down in forms. Some do. Maybe someday we'll change our minds. For now, it's enough that the night was full and the morning was clear, and the space between them was not empty in the way we expected. And that a call rose from one side of the camp and a reply reached it from the other, in a forest that doesn't require us to believe anything, to go on being what it is. I can't tell you what made those sounds. I can tell you that if you're ever down around 20 miles south of Warren and you hear something rooted and low step up into the air and pour itself out across the treetops, you should sit still, keep your lights low, and listen to the way the world answers itself. That's what we did, or tried to. And for one long night, the forest spoke in two voices, and that was enough. A dark sky camping trip that turned strange. I've told this story only a handful of times, and every time I do, I feel like the room tilts a little, like the world itself doesn't want it to be told. Some of the details, they don't line up, even in my own head. But what I remember most is the silence, the kind that eats your heartbeat, and the light that didn't belong to anything human. This was a few years back, late autumn, in the Allegheny National Forest. There were four of us, all older family friends, the kind of group that's most comfortable around a fire, with camp chairs than sleeping on roots. Me, George, my oldest friend, a man who could make a roof out of duct tape and stubbornness, his sister Helen, who teaches history and can never resist throwing in a fact at the worst possible time, and Sarah, who carried a camera everywhere she went. She's the type who will stop a hike to crouch and take 50 pictures of moss because she can. We weren't kids. We weren't looking for trouble. We just wanted one more campout before winter came. We headed down Route 666. Yes, that's the real name. The locals even call it the Devil's Highway. The ridges swallowed the road in long, dark waves. The towns got smaller, and the radio gave up somewhere past Sheffield. That's how the Allegheny gets you. It doesn't shout wilderness. It just erases the rest of the world until it's only you and the trees. By the time we found a clearing on a ridge above a hollow, the sun was bleeding out behind the hills. The site was perfect, flat enough for tents, close to a trickling run, and best of all, it opened to a wide slice of sky. Out here, the stars looked violent in their numbers, more than you think the world should allow. We ate stew from a pot, told old stories, and let the fire chase off the chill. George joked about us being too old to freeze our butts off for fun, and Helen lectured us on how the CCC once built fire towers in this forest. Sarah set up her tripod and aimed it at the Milky Way, swearing she'd capture it better than NASA. That's when it started. A bright white light slid across the stars. At first, we thought it was a satellite, but then it stopped. Dead still. Satellites don't stop, Helen said flatly. Before we could argue, it darted at a sharp angle. Not a curve, but an instant impossible turn. Then another. Then it shot straight up until it winked out of existence. Nobody laughed. We tried to shake it off, but the forest wouldn't let us. The night sounds died. No owls, no crickets, no breeze in the needles of the hemlocks, just fire and our own uneasy breathing. Then came the hum. It wasn't a noise in the ears so much as a vibration in the body. Low, deep, crawling into our teeth. The metal of Sarah's tripod rattled. My enamel felt like it was trying to come loose. The fire popped, throwing sparks. At that exact moment, a flash of white light cut through the trees. Not lightning. There was no sound. No thunder. Just a clean burst of daylight in the dead of night. Then another. And another. Each one warped the shadows as if the trees were bending toward something at their roots. When it stopped, we were left blinking. The fire suddenly too small, the dark pressing in close. Sarah checked her camera. Dead. She swapped batteries. Dead. George's compass spun in lazy circles. Static, he muttered, like saying the word could explain away what was happening. I noticed the glow first, down in the hollow, a soft blue-white radiance pulsing like a heartbeat. We argued, but of course we went. That's what people do when they know they shouldn't. The hike down was a slow creep, our beams catching trunks and eye shine that wasn't there when you looked twice. The air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. At the bottom, the ground opened to a perfect circle, 15 feet across. Soil disturbed, still warm. The leaves around it were untouched, but inside the ring, they were gone, stripped clean. Helen crouched and touched the dirt. "This isn't fire," she said. It was like it was turned. The hum was stronger down there. My chest felt tight. My jaw buzzed, and the hair on my arms stood straight up. Sarah swore she saw something move inside the glow before it cut out. Tall shapes that weren't trees. When the light blinked away, the hollow was ordinary again. Too ordinary. George wanted to go back. Nobody argued. Back at camp, we tried to settle, but it was already too late. The night had changed. The fire seemed to shrink. Our watches ticked wrong, seconds that dragged, then snapped forward. Helen's notebook pages stuck together, as if damp, though the air was dry. Sarah's spare batteries drained instantly. Then at the far edge of the clearing, a figure appeared. It stood motionless between two hemlocks. Tall. 7 feet, maybe more. Thin. Impossibly thin. Limbs too long. Head tilted unnaturally. George raised his flashlight. The beam caught pale, smooth skin, eyes black and featureless, reflecting no light at all. The hum roared, and then the light came. Not one flash this time, but a flood. White fire poured over us. My muscles locked. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Even the scream that clawed at my throat wouldn't come. I saw things in the light, shapes bending around us, fingers that weren't hands brushing against my arm. Helen later swore she felt herself floating. Sarah said something touched her shoulder. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, the fire was ash. The clearing was unchanged, but the stars above were in different positions. The moon had shifted higher. Hours were gone. Sarah's wrist burned with a mark. 3 dots in a triangle, faintly raised like a burn. She insisted it hadn't been there before. I suppose she'd know. We sat in stunned silence, piecing together fragments. None of us remembered lying down. None of us remembered sleep. Only the light. Only the paralysis. "Dream," George insisted. But his voice was thin, trembling. Helen pointed at the watches. All of them were wrong, each by different hours. And in Sarah's camera, when she powered it back on, the memory card showed dozens of blank white frames stamped with times we couldn't account for. When the gray light of morning came, it brought bird song and wind, as if the night had never happened. We hiked down to the hollow again. The circle was gone. The ground was covered in leaves, undisturbed. But nearby, 20 feet up a tree, Branches had been snapped clean, higher than any of us could reach. On the hike out, we moved in silence. Once, midway up the ridge, the forest went quiet again for a span of 20 seconds, long enough for us all to stop, frozen, waiting. When the sounds returned, we didn't speak of it. As we reached the truck, I looked back. High above the trees, in the pale morning sky, a single white light rose, silent, smooth. It blinked once and was gone. We drove home without the radio. No one wanted noise. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe we dreamed it together. Maybe we fell asleep and invented the same impossible story. Maybe. But when I look at Sarah's wrist, and I've seen the mark fade and return over the years, like it remembers what she won't, I know better. Something was there in the Allegheny woods, something we were never meant to see. And I'll tell you this, I've been back to the Allegheny since then. I'll hike, I'll camp, I'll watch the stars. But when the silence drops and the hum comes back in your chest, I don't look up anymore. I don't want to see what's waiting. I had a quiet game of tennis today. There was no racket. Meh. Oh, that guy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.